What's going on, everyone, and welcome into Plizont's podcast, filled to the brim with glitchy analysis and freezing cold takes so cold that they're boiling hot. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Hungry Howie's Baton Rouge. Guys, check out their website for takeout deals and delivery deals. Right now, they've got an awesome special. Get a large one-topping pizza for just $7.99. Thanks again to Hungry Howie's Baton Rouge. Now, today's episode, everyone, we are going to wrap up March Madness, and oh my gosh, what a March it's been. And we're going to get into some NBA, and we're going to continue with our NFL draft analysis. So first up, let's talk about the women's national championship and the men's national championship for college basketball. Don't have a lot to say about the men's. UConn won. It was pretty expected. Well, maybe not the Final Four, but the championship was expected. UConn was going to win. I think they were like the fifth largest favorite in college national championship history at 11.5 points. It's pretty impressive. I thought I saw a dominant performance, and yeah, that's what UConn is. They seem to be building a dynasty there. So congrats to UConn. And then last but not least for college, we are talking LSU versus Iowa. Premier matchup, phenomenal show. I could not believe what I was getting to see with my eyes. Angel Reese versus Caitlin Clark, two of the most dominant women in college basketball's history. Not just this year, history, going head to head. LSU gave one of the greatest performances in a game that I've ever seen. And that is not any kind of dramatic statement. They shot lights out. They shot 64% from three. 64% from three. Jasmine Carson shot 7 for 7 from the floor in the first half. She had 21 points. She averages like 8 on the season. Bonkers performance. Absolutely insane. I was so happy to see LSU win it. For those of you who don't know, my wife is a PhD student at LSU, so I guess I'm going to give you guys a little Go Tigers, or maybe a Go Tigers. So, that being said, congrats to LSU. There's a lot of talk about Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese getting into it there at the end, with Angel Reese going up to Caitlin Clark and hitting the ring finger celebration and doing the "you can't see me" celebration right in front of Caitlin Clark's face. Look, don't get me wrong, it was taunting, trash talk, but that's what college sports and just sports in general is about. I saw people on Twitter call her classless, call her like scummy. Absolutely not here for any of that slander. Men do it all the time. The only people who I really saw talking about it being classlessness just so happened to be people of an opposite race. So it's tough. It's very, very tough. I see no problem with what Angel Reese did. She did exactly what almost any man has done in the past. Literally, we saw it the other night, Patrick Beverley going up for a layup against LeBron James, the greatest player of all time, in my opinion, if not at least a top 5 greatest player of all time. And he hit the too little celebration. Is that taunting? Sure. Is it classless? Absolutely not. That's what Patrick Beverley does. And that's what Angel Reese does. She is unapologetically her, and that's what I love about her game. That's what I love about the program that LSU is building. I'm all here for it. The women's college basketball national championship was phenomenal. I hope that they get to meet up next year because both of them are going to be back. And then I hope that it continues into the WNBA. I would love, if not anything, just for more sports to watch. This was an absolutely phenomenal showing for women's sports. As a matter of fact, its average viewership had just about as much as an NBA playoff game. Huge strides for women. Awesome game. That's all I'm going to say about it. Congrats again to LSU. Oh, okay. And one more side note. Okay, we're going to talk Caitlin Clark for a second. Now, for those insiders within Plizont's podcast, I have been going back and forth with a take that Caitlin Clark could play in the NBA. I've decided it is too cold for even Plizont for a freezing cold take. It's no disrespect to Caitlin Clark. As a matter of fact, it's a compliment that I even began that conversation that she could play in the NBA. The only reason that I don't think she could hang is because she's 155 pounds. But I will say this, and this is a Plizont freezing cold take. Give Caitlin Clark a shot to do anything with men over the summer in the fall, whatever. It does not matter. I would love to see Caitlin Clark 5-on-5 in an open gym with men. I just want to see how she can perform. That's just a compliment to how transcendent of a player she is. I have never seen anything remotely close to her style, anything like that in women's sports. I think she plays just like Stephen Curry. Her range is insane. The way the offense is set up for Iowa, they have her coming off of screens all the time to get her open, just like Curry. And look, is she the best defensive player on the planet? No, but she makes up for it with her insane offense. I looked at every single shot just like I looked at Stephen Curry's, and I thought it was going to go in every single time. And the times that it did, when she pulled up from 35, my mind was blown. I have never seen a woman do that. So I wanted to give Caitlin Clark her props and just let people know that I think of any woman that I've seen so far play any kind of basketball, I think she could be the greatest of all time. Okay, moving into the NBA, we're going to talk about one little piece of news first, and then we're going to get into a couple of lists that I've got for you. I know that all the listeners love lists, so I'm going to go ahead and give you the first piece of news. Andrew Wiggins is coming back. There's no report on whether or not he's going to play in the regular season or the playoffs, but he is reportedly back in the Bay Area. And I'm telling you right now, the Golden State Warriors are still the team to beat. They are the defending champions. They are the dynasty in this past, 10 years, 15 years. They are them, not him, them. The Warriors are hitting their stride just when it's time. I truly, wholeheartedly believe that whoever they play in the round one, whether it's the Kings, the Clippers, the Suns, the Lakers, the Nuggets, they are winning. Look, I know they have an atrocious road record, but when they turn it on, it is like no other team that I've seen this entire season in the Western Conference. Now, the East, it's a tough argument, but I definitely think the Warriors can contend for a finals. I am a huge fan of this Warriors team. We've got Klay's jersey right behind me. Just don't count the Warriors out. That's all I'm asking. Don't count the Warriors out. They've been counted out before. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people counted them out in that Boston Celtics series last year. Guess what? 4 rings. All right, so next up, we're going to go through contender by contender in the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference and talk about those X factors. Now, there's going to be a couple teams that I'm leaving off this list, and they're being left off the list for a reason. I might get into it. We'll see. Let's go ahead and start with the West. First up, the Denver Nuggets. Now, usually the X factor is not about a star player and their play. It's usually about like a star player and their health, or maybe another role player. But this one right here is going to be Nikola Jokic is the X factor. We're going to have to see him step up like he's never stepped up before. Look, last year when he was playing without Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. for a good bit, we did not expect Nikola Jokic to do a lot. He stepped up and he played there. If he could play with that level of play come the playoffs with Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., then I'm a big buyer of that Nuggets team. But we've never seen that happen before. The best that the Nuggets have ever gotten is the conference finals, and they got beat pretty handily. So I think Jokic has got to prove some people wrong and prove that he didn't have to win a finals this year, but he has to make serious playoff contention. If he can get to the conference finals and lose in 6 or 7, that's fine. That's all I'm asking. Look, the ring culture is, in my opinion, pretty toxic. So I am just for Jokic making solid moves in the playoffs. But he is my X factor for the Nuggets. Next up, I've got the Phoenix Suns. Kevin Durant is the X factor. And guess what? His health is his X factor. I'm not sure if Kevin Durant is going to be able to sustain this longevity with no injuries. Same to go with Chris Paul, but we're going to focus mainly on Kevin Durant. He's probably going to lead the team in scoring. He's probably one of their best defenders. The Suns team does not have much depth when you talk about after their 6-man maybe. I am not a buyer of the Suns team, but I cannot count out probably the greatest pound-for-pound scorer in NBA history. Third on the list, the Golden State Warriors. Stephen Curry, Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson. They're not the X factors. Who are the X factors? Jordan Poole, Dante DiVincenzo. Why? If you look at the lineup, if Wiggins comes back, Curry, Klay, Wiggins, Looney, and Draymond Green, that starting 5 has the best plus-minus in the NBA for a starting lineup this season. I have no doubts. Everybody expects this Warriors starting lineup to perform and perform tremendously. But the bench is another question. And I think that Dante DiVincenzo and Jordan Poole are going to have to carry. Poole is going to be the offensive hand, and DiVincenzo is going to be the defensive hand. Those two have to go hand in hand to get this Warriors team through the playoffs. It's going to be huge at the end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter, into the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter, to keep, if they have a lead, to keep a lead or to cut into somebody else's lead. I definitely think that Poole and DiVincenzo can do this. They've done it in big games before. So that is my X factor for the Warriors. Last but not least, on my Western Conference contenders, Lakers. LeBron, Anthony Davis. Not their X factor about their play. It's about their health. They've both had their big injuries for the year. So if luck is on their side and they play healthy throughout the time, I think that the Lakers have one of the best chances to win the West. They've got an awesome team surrounded by them. I'm pretty sure they're first in defensive rating since the All-Star break, which is an amazing stat when it comes to playoffs. An NBA Finals winner has not been outside of the top 10 in defensive rating this entire century. The Warriors did it, the Cavs did it, the Heat did it, Spurs did it, Lakers did it. So defensive efficiency is one of the biggest factors in the playoffs, and the Lakers have that right here, right now, but they can't do it without LeBron and Anthony Davis being healthy. Let's go ahead and move into the Eastern Conference. Okay, in the East, we're talking first 76ers. Who is their X factor? It's not Embiid, it's James Harden. Two things. Does he have enough left in the tank to make a deep playoff push? And does he have enough left in the tank physically to make a deep playoff push? We have seen Harden get injured during the season quite often the past few years. We've seen Harden fall short in terms of performance in the playoffs quite often. Can he do it this time? He's one of the greatest players of all time without a ring in terms of like longevity career. I mean, Embiid's also one of them, but Harden is going to have an amazing playoffs for the 76ers to get into the finals. Joel Embiid said it last year at the end of their playoff run that Harden has just got to be himself and they'll perform great. Now, this came off a loss, but if Harden performs like a vintage James Harden at the end of his Houston Rocket days, hey, 76ers might just make the finals. Next up, we've got the Boston Celtics. It's nothing to do with Jason Tatum. He plays phenomenal almost every single game in almost every single setting. It's going to be Jaylen Brown. This is a huge playoffs for Jaylen Brown. Why? Because he has the Supermax coming up. There's a lot of pressure on it. There have been multiple reports that if he doesn't make an all-NBA team, that he is not eligible for the Supermax, which means that he is going to get offered $100 million less from the Celtics or any other team. So, that being said, if Jaylen Brown does not make an all-NBA team, there have been reports that he wants out of Boston. So with that lingering over his head during the playoffs, is he going to perform like he should? That's why he's the X factor. Last but not least, we've got the Milwaukee Bucks. Who is their X factor? Chris Middleton. Not necessarily to do with his health, because he's been pretty healthy since he's come back from his huge injury, but he has not played like the Chris Middleton of old. I think he is kind of in his like Klay Thompson arc, coming back from a huge injury, trying to recover and get back to what he was. Okay, he has shown flashes of it, just like Klay did, but he's got to get back to being consistent. He doesn't have that big of a defensive assignment this playoffs, but I do think that he is going to be asked to do some on the defensive end, and that's all going to depend on whether or not he can succeed on the offensive end. You see a lot of players who get out of their mind on defense, distracted and down in the dumps when their shots aren't falling. So can Chris Middleton, play defense with or without his shots falling? That's why he's the X factor. Okay, now there's a couple of teams that I just wanted to point out that are not on this list that I just want to go ahead and, talk about. We got the Kings, the Clippers, and the Mavericks. Mavericks not even in the play-in right now, so let's just go ahead and bump them off the list. Oh, and the Cavaliers. The Cavaliers are not on this list. But moving on. Kings, they just do not have the defense, I think, to contend for the finals. The Clippers, there's a lot of X factors on here with health concerns, but nothing compared to what the Clippers have gone through. Just a series of unfortunate events, time in and time out. Paul George is not even playing right now. And then last but not least, the Cavaliers. The Cavaliers are not on this list simply because I don't think that they have the Kevin Durant-like talent to play in a playoff series and win without the chemistry. Now, the Cavs have had a whole season together, but I just don't know if that's enough to get through this really, really tough Eastern Conference. I think 3 out of the top 3 teams in the NBA right now are Eastern Conference teams. I don't see them getting past Milwaukee, the 76ers, or the Celtics. So that's why the Cavaliers are kind of a tier below finals contender. But that's going to do it for our X Factors. We'll have to wait and see who actually decides to step up for their team. Okay, this next segment I'm kind of excited about because I usually don't get into hindsight situations, but we're going to talk about the top 3 winners and losers of NBA trades that happened this season. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the winners. First up, the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers really secured the bag by getting D'Angelo Russell, getting Jared Vanderbilt, and getting rid of Patrick Beverley and Russell Westbrook. Patrick Beverley and Westbrook are having good seasons outside of the Lakers. Props to them. It just was not a fit. And it was very clear from the beginning that it was not a fit. Doesn't really have to do with, them personally, but both of them just don't mesh with Anthony Davis and LeBron James. So who did they bring in? D'Angelo Russell and Jared Vanderbilt. 2 guys that have seemed to mesh well with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Huge win for the Lakers. They didn't have to give up both of their first round picks like everybody thought they would. So that's a massive dub because then, if the Lakers can't finish this and get a finals win this year, they could take those picks, trade for somebody else. And they've got a decent amount of space for maybe another star. Next up, we've got the Phoenix Suns trading for Kevin Durant. If the Phoenix Suns did not trade for Kevin Durant, I don't know if we'd be talking about them as finals contenders. He's had a lot of injuries. They gave up quite a bit to get him. But if they don't win the finals this year, I really do think that they have next year. I think I might have said that they didn't, but looking at it, and Stephen Curry playing at 35 and playing well, and Kevin Durant being at 34, I really do think that they have maybe one more year. And their finals door was cracked open. I think Kevin Durant has the potential to kick that door open. So that's a big win for the Phoenix Dubs. I like the Nets, lastly, but not leastly. I think the Nets won the trades because Kevin Durant and Kyrie did not want to be there anymore. I'm not going to count that against the Nets. It just did not seem like there were a lot of fits going on with the Nets with Harden, Kyrie, and Kevin Durant over the past 2 to 3 years. So for the Nets to get out 5 first-round picks, 4 second-round picks, and 3 major role-playing pieces like Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, that's a huge win for the Nets. They can either build off of that and draft some players, homegrown talent, or they can use that as trade assets to sign and trade or get people in free agency because now their cap is looking more and more open. So Nets win it big in this. They are probably my biggest winner. So yeah, I'm a fan of those 3 teams. They did a great job at the trade deadline. Let's talk about my 3 losers of the trade deadline. And some of it is not really their fault. So first up, we got the Houston Rockets. Not a massive loss, just a series of unfortunate events. The Rockets have had so many problems. Their head coach reportedly cried because he couldn't reach his team. They're a bunch of young guys who just don't have a lot of experience. They don't have any meaningful vets on that team anymore, and that's who we're going to talk about. They traded away Eric Gordon and a second-round pick, got back Danny Green, and then cut Danny Green. So they got nothing. They shipped off an extremely important vet, an awesome bench player, probably one of the best 6 men in the past 10 to 15 years, and they got nothing for it. So I am not a fan of what the Rockets did. I think that they obviously they lost that trade, but they make it onto my list because there's not a lot of other losses in the trade deadline, in my opinion, that were major. But second up, we've got the Golden State Warriors trading away James Wiseman basically to get back Gary Payton. Gary Payton II was on the Warriors last year. He was a free agent in the summer, and the Warriors let him slide because they didn't want to pay the luxury tax. Fine, so be it. James Wiseman is a former number 2 overall pick. The Warriors traded him to the Pistons for 5 second-round picks, and they flipped that to the Trailblazers for Gary Payton. Not a great trade. Wiseman now is averaging 13-8 on the Pistons. Now look, I know it's the Pistons, but still, 13-8 is not bad. He obviously had some chemistry issues in Golden State. For the Warriors to only get back basically Gary Payton, who they could have gotten in free agency, for the former number 2 overall pick, that's a huge loss, but not as big as the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks don't have a first-round pick in next year's draft, I think the 2026 draft, and the 2028 draft, I'm pretty sure. Either way, they've given up a lot of first-round picks in the last few years, and they gave up another one to get Kyrie Irving. The Mavericks have a losing record since trading for him. I'm not going to put it on Kyrie Irving personally. I'm going to put it on the fact that I called this when the trade happened. It was not going to work. Not because of personalities, which, that could play a factor, but there's only one basketball. Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving have some of the highest usage rates in the NBA over the last, 5 years. I don't know who thought that was a good idea, and the Mavericks have not performed at all. They performed exactly how I thought they would perform. Terribly defensively, terribly in closing games. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys some stats. I think they're 18th in the league in defensive rating in the past 15 games. They've lost, I'm pretty sure, 8 games by less than 3 possessions over the past 15 games. Had a lot of terrible losses, like their most recent one to the Atlanta Hawks in overtime. Luka came out in a press conference. He said he's not having fun anymore. And I really don't think it has to do anything with Kyrie personally. According to all these different reports, Kyrie Irving has been a great teammate, but there's only one basketball, and you can't both have it. Luka Doncic is a pass first, shoot first, dribble guy. Kyrie Irving is a dribbling shot creator. Both of those guys have to have the ball. Terrible trade for the Mavericks. They've basically muddied up their entire future with Luka, and it could make him so mad that he's done with the Mavericks. We've seen a lot of stars in the past few years just have it, demand a trade. Will Luka do that? I'm not sure. That's, yet to be seen, but right now, the Mavericks' biggest loser of the trade deadline. Next up, talking all NFL, let's get into a little bit of news. First up, Aaron Rodgers going to the Jets. Probably. But with that being said, there's a lot of pressure to win now in New York if it happens, which I really do think it will. I just don't know when, but I think it's going to happen. Let's talk about, is win now situations a good environment to win? My answer, absolutely not. Too much pressure, especially on a very young roster like the Jets. The only situations where we've seen win now work is like Tom Brady and LeBron James. Yes, Aaron Rodgers is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, but he's 39 now? Going to be 39? This is not a good situation for the Jets at all. The Packers obviously don't want to give up Rodgers for too little, but they also don't want to just hang Rodgers around because eventually they're going to start owing him money on his contract. The more and more time that it takes to get Rodgers to the Jets, the more and more pressure is going to mount on the Jets organization to win now. I don't think the Jets are winning anything, even if Rodgers gets traded to the Jets. Look, you got to go through Patrick Mahomes. I think the Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence are better. So I am not a buyer of this Jets team. I think that they will probably come up second in the division, get a wild card spot, and probably be out by the divisional. Next up, we're going to be talking about Anthony Richardson. I have a Plizont freezing cold take, so cold that it's boiling hot. We're going to go ahead and get into it. Look, he wowed at his pro day. He threw a ball into the roof. He threw a deep ball at the end and did a freaking back handspring. So unbelievably impressive. The talent is off the charts. He is an athletic freak. and I'm going to compare him to a unicorn, Victor Wembanyama. Now, I thought that he was going to be a bust. I still think he's going to be a bust. But if I was an NBA GM, I'd be taking Victor with the number one pick 100 out of 100 times. And now I'm saying the same about Anthony Richardson. It's not because he's ready to go. He's not. He's a raw talent, but the raw talent that is there is off the charts. If somebody, anybody, could get this guy in a gym like 24 hours a day, on a field 24 hours a day, he will probably be the best quarterback in the NFL in 3 years. Now, last in NFL news, okay, we're going to be talking about one thing and one thing only. Has nothing to do with the NFL itself, maybe. Has to do with the media. This is a dry time in NFL media. The free agency market is pretty much dried up. The draft is a month away. And there's only talk about Aaron Rodgers and Lamar Jackson every single day. So now, what have they decided to do? They've decided to talk about how the Colts are going to trade back in the draft and get away from that fourth pick so they don't draft a quarterback this year, trying to go for next year. I'm here to tell you, this is a Plizont lock. The Colts are taking a quarterback at 4. They are tired of the QB carousel. Phillip Rivers wasn't it. Jacoby Brissett wasn't it. Andrew Luck retired. Carson Wentz wasn't it. Matt Ryan wasn't it. The Colts fan base is not here for it, and I'll tell you who's not here for it. Jim Irsay. Sick and tired of 9-8, 7-9, whatever. Get this man his quarterback, or I think he might blow a gasket. The Colts are staying at the 4 spot. They might even move up to take a quarterback. Even if CJ Stroud and Bryce Young go 1 and 2, they're drafting Will Levis or they're drafting Anthony Richardson. That is a Plizont lock. You can guarantee it. Take it to the bank. I'm sure that they've got some kind of odds out there on a sports book. Colts taking a quarterback, book it. All right, so last but not least, we're doing our NFL draft analysis. We're going to go team by team, talk about who they should draft, any kind of free agents they should sign, and any kind of trades they should make. We're going to go team by team, like I said, up until the draft. Let's talk first today, Arizona Cardinals. First, the basics. $11 million in cap space, the 3rd pick, the 34th pick, the 66th pick, and the 96th pick. Kyler Murray is going to miss most of this year repairing his ACL. He already had surgery, obviously, but he's going to be out for an extended period of time. This seems like a big rebuilding year for the Cardinals. They've got some solid linebackers and a young core on offense, but they definitely need some help in the pass rush. First up, J.J. Watt, who was their best pass rusher last year, has retired. But they've, like I said, they've got some solid offensive pieces at like wide receiver. They've got Marquise Brown. They got Zach Ertz. They really do need, though, they need a defensive end, an edge rusher, an offensive tackle, and a corner. Those are their big, dire needs. Now, their intermediate needs, they could use another running back. James Conner's had some injury problems. A backup could be a pretty good spot for like later in the draft. And then last but not least, they need a defensive tackle as like an intermediate need. So first up, free agent targets. I think Taylor Lewan, who is a former Titans offensive tackle, would be a great spot for the Cardinals. Get Kyler Murray some pass protection when he comes back. Obviously, when you tear your ACL, it's not a guarantee, but it's pretty likely that you're going to lose a step. And Kyler Murray, being as small as he is, has still got to get maybe like an extra half second of pass protection to read down the field. So I definitely think Taylor Lewan is a great pickup for the Cardinals. Next up, Frank Clark, still a free agent, still got a little bit left in the tank. Solid edge rusher, defensive end, like outside linebacker kind of thing. I think he's really good on 3rd down. That's a solid pickup for the Cardinals. Next up, Shaquille Griffin, cornerback. He got his bag in Jacksonville. Maybe he takes a pay cut to come to Arizona for a year. That's like a CJ Gardner-Johnson type deal, maybe. You could offer him like $8 million and maybe he'll come. So yeah, Shaquille Griffin, solid corner, good pickup for the Cardinals. The one trade that I would recommend for the Cardinals is to trade DeAndre Hopkins. Not because he's washed, he's getting there though. And this is not a win now season for Arizona. And I don't know how good DeAndre Hopkins will be, not this year, but the next year. So any kind of value you can get, a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick, trade him. It's no disrespect to him, but the Cardinals don't need him. They don't need him on the cap. They don't need him on the field. They maybe even need to tank to get a good pick next year. Now, let's talk about the draft. Third pick in the draft, the Cardinals have got to go with Will Anderson. If anything, the Cardinals need a pass rusher. One of the worst pass rushing teams last year, and that's why they had one of the worst defenses. They were allowing almost, I think, the most passing yards per game, and they gave up almost the most passing touchdowns per game. So, hugely recommend this Arizona Cardinals team to get a pass rusher. Absolutely necessary, in my opinion. Next up, 34th pick, guess what? Double down. Drew Sanders, the edge rusher out of Arkansas. Former teammate of Will Anderson. I'm all here for it. Any kind of help on the pass rush that the Cardinals can get, grab it. I'm not even kidding. Even if you don't get Will Anderson here, you got to take Drew Sanders. It's a need, an absolute need. One of the most important needs in the entire NFL. The Cardinals have got to get somebody on the quarterback. Next up, 66th pick, I'm taking Darius Rush, a corner out of South Carolina. Now, when you get towards the third round, into like the late third, early fourth, who's going to be taken where? It's a mystery. But Darius Rush is, in my opinion, a pretty good steal here. He's quick, aggressive. He has a lot of dynamic playmaking, and I'm pretty sure that he would be a good fit on this Cardinals team. Next up, last but not least, the 96th pick, taking Chase Brown out of Illinois. Not a lot of people talking about him. He didn't wow at the combine or the pro day or anything like that. But Chase Brown, I think, led the Division I, maybe Power 5 in yards per carry and yards after contact. He had a really solid season. He was top 5 in rushing yards on the year. Not a Heisman contender or anything like that. But in the 4th round, that's a pretty solid pickup. Next team that we're covering, Baltimore Ravens. Let's get into it. This is going to be a doozy. $6 million in cap space. They have the 22nd pick and the 86th pick in the draft. There's only really one thing to talk about here. Lamar Jackson has demanded a trade. We don't know if he's coming back. The Ravens have got to figure out something probably before the draft. If not, let's talk about their dire needs. They need a wide receiver, maybe even a second one. You know what? 2 wide receivers. The Ravens need both of them. They don't want them. It's not an intermediate need. This is a dire need. Next up, defensive end and defensive tackle. They lost a lot over the last couple of years. I think the Ravens need both of those things. Now, intermediately, they can use another running back and another wide receiver. I think they've got to redo the entire wide receiver core. Last but not least, they could use a solid edge rusher. It's not like a necessity. They've got a great set of DBs, but a pass rusher wouldn't hurt. So let's talk about some free agent targets. Kenny Golladay is a solid target to be your wide receiver 2, maybe wide receiver 3. Odell Beckham Jr. is a solid wide receiver target. There's been some rumors that he's interested in going to Baltimore if Lamar Jackson comes back. Huge fan. Last but not least, we've got Yannick Ngakoue, former Jags, Colts, I think Raiders player. Good pass rusher, solid defensive end. Oh, and I wanted to add this. If you trade away Lamar Jackson and you don't get a quarterback going into the future, just grab Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, he's not the same as Lamar Jackson by any means necessary, but he's a solid quarterback on the market that you could get for a bargain price. Hey, go ahead. And if you're not comfortable with that, whatever. I definitely think that the Ravens absolutely have to keep Lamar Jackson. If not, this whole team is a wash. You might as well just go ahead and start over for next year. Get you Caleb Williams or Drake May or whatever in next year's draft. Speaking of the draft, let's talk about it. 22nd pick, I'd be taking Quentin Johnston from TCU. This guy is huge. Lamar Jackson has never had anybody like him. If you're trying to appease him and get him to come back, that's not a bad pick right there. With the 86th pick, I'm taking Tank Bigsby. J.K. Dobbins had a solid year last year, but knee injuries and running backs do not go hand in hand. I'd be a big taker of Tank Bigsby. He has fallen in this draft, but I've seen him play on the field, and that man does not have like the greatest intangibles on the planet, but that man knows how to play ball. Give him the rock and just let him go. In this run-heavy Ravens offense, hey, I'm all for Tanks Bigsby. This Ravens team has had a running back committee for like the past, 5 years. Why not? Get the Ravens another running back. Tank Bigsby is a sleeper in this draft. Huge pickup for them at 86. That, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of Plizont's podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.